I love the Wisdom Wednesday thing, by the way. Really cool. I'm like, oh, it's so
We need people to become wiser, right? We're less apt to have mistakes made, and I think there's so much misinformation out there right now. That's what really scares me.
Exactly.
So I want to make sure that we're giving good, solid information and people start making good decisions. All right.
All right, I think we're good. It says it's streaming.
All right. Hey, everybody. Torey Eisenman with Benchmark Real Estate Group. And we are here today with Jennifer Englert from the Orlando Law Group. And she's going to share a little bit about SBA loans, debt, mortgages, kind of things that you might be concerned about today. So Jennifer, if you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what's going on in the world today.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for the opportunity, Torey. I am going to kind of talk about the top 3 things on my mind today that I think people need to know, kind of the top 3 things that people are asking us about topic-wise. We've had some of this stuff. A little bit of this content has been out before, but most of it's fresh, especially about the SBA loans. Pretty much that's a changing thing every day. I feel like finally there's some clarity to all of that, but I'm going to give the most recent tips. A lot of people are already in the system, but then we'll talk also a little bit about debt and how to handle that, which applies to people and businesses, and then a little bit about the whole estate planning, medical, surrogate, and that kind of thing, which is pretty important in this right now. A lot of people are calling us because they procrastinated on that. Everybody does. So I know that you've got an opportunity for questions, and I think you're going to let me answer whatever I can. And if we don't, Torey and I promise that we'll get the answers out to everybody, because I know it's scary not knowing. And a lot of times just having an answer, even if it's one you don't love, it's still better than not knowing, or Googling everything and finding 50 different answers, or on your Facebook group, etc. So we're all in the same struggle bus. So let's try to help each other get off of it. That's kind of how we're looking at it. Now the SBA loans, a lot of people have started to apply. I feel like I've said this a lot of times, but I'll quickly summarize them again. There's the $10,000 emergency bridge loan that was supposed to come within 3 days. No one has gotten that yet. I know we all applied right away. Some of us applied last week when I talked to you about it. No one has seen those funds. So generally, it looks like that will come off of whatever other loan you receive, although no one knows that exactly, but most of the stuff I've seen from the government makes that appear that will happen if you even ever get that money. To be honest, it sounds like some of the other stuff is going to come in first. The second is the PPP loan, the one that's tied to your payroll. Many people have applied for that now. If you have not applied for that already, you need to be doing that like yesterday. Now, if you don't have a relationship with a bank, because a lot of my people are in that spot, like they don't have a relationship with a bank, you're going to have a tough time. The PPP is an SBA backed loan, but it is money from banks. So your bank is basically giving you the loan. The government's promising to back it for them, since there's no personal guarantee. That's not our problem. That's the bank's problem. But a lot of the reasons why some banks were slow to start was because they wanted to make sure that their ducks were in a row, because eventually if they lend us money or started to approve things and the government didn't have their regulation, then they wouldn't get paid. I actually just applied for mine today around 1 o'clock. I know people who applied at last. A lot of those people had to give a lot of documents back and forth. Mine was super streamlined because my bank waited. They took only what they needed. We had a folder of like 50 things. They only took about 3, and we just did it. If you don't, like I said, if you don't have a banker at your disposal, then like I said, reach out to me. I'm sure, I know Torey has a large network, but it's time to get with one, because you do need a banking relationship. Some banks are using third parties. All that's going to make it tough. The third loan is the one, it's a much broader loan. It is an SBA loan. You do have to give collateral. It is not forgivable. For some people, it is definitely the right answer. I'm not going to go into it, but too much, except to the extent that it is an SBA loan and it's a whole lot of a longer process. Again, the money's supposed to come within 2 to 3 weeks, but it is directly with the SBA. You apply for it yourself. I would say have someone help you, like an accountant or your banker or your attorney, unless you have a really strong like CFO or comptroller internally and you know exactly what you're up to. Tips regarding the PPP loan, it is 2.5 times your employee expenses and salary. It is not your 1099 people. That was up in the air for a long time. If you're a company with a lot of 1099s, they can apply. It is good if you're like a solo practitioner, you have a side gig, or you're solo and you're just kind of doing something on your own, life coaches, realtors, all of those types, because you can apply for that loan. So now if you didn't pay yourself a salary all last year, then that's where, again, some of the stuff that I've talked about over the years and how to run your business right, now you kind of see why, because it would help you if you had did it. If not, then like I said, live and learn. But people should apply for this. My one other good tip on that is it sounds like the money is going to start coming in about 2 weeks. That's kind of what I'm hearing. You do have to prove, in order for it to be forgiven, that you used up to 75% of it for payroll. 25% can be used for rent, utilities, some interest, a limited amount. It's a good idea to open a new bank account to receive that money, or use it in an account you don't really have anything in, and pay the payroll directly out of that account. Later, when you're going to have to prove to the government that you used it in a way that should be forgivable, that'll make it a lot quicker and easier. I probably will end up doing another session on this, but that is kind of the best, most recent information and good practice tips. Nobody's going to get the money for a little while, so we'll keep people updated, but I think that's kind of the questions I'm hearing the most.
But on the PPP, they need to apply to their bank for that forgiveness. It's not automatic, right?
Correct. And nobody knows what that's going to look like. So I can only, it's been so but this is a good way to, like I said, the bank account, the separate bank account or the empty bank account that you already have, receiving the money into there and then using it, like having your payroll drawn right out of there, is a good way to show that it'll be real streamlined. Because at some point you're going to have to prove that you used it for what you said you would use it for in order for it to be forgiven. So just kind of, people a lot smarter than me have already put their heads together and said, okay, this is a good way to do it. And it makes perfect sense to me. If you can provide like 3 months of bank statements from that account showing here's the money coming in, here's it going out for payroll and rent, then there's not a whole lot to argue with. You provide your pay proof that you put yourself on payroll and like your rent, and then you're done. So yeah, however that needs to be done, obviously we'll keep bringing information to everybody, and once we know, but nobody's even thinking about how to show that. There's questions about how quick you have to use it and 1,000 other things. Nobody really knows any of those answers. I'm on a whole lot of webinars every day where there's a whole lot of I don't know. So to the extent that that's the most recent information that I've got, everybody kind of has the same questions. The information will get out there in the world. To me, after talking to a lot of professionals and people going through it and my banker and other banks, that's kind of where we are.
So that's great information, because I think that now the 1099 SBA loan comes out this Friday, I believe, right? So people that are 1099, it's a separate application from the PPP program for businesses looking for payroll money.
Yeah, they said they're going to start taking them this Friday, whether the application, the one for the businesses changed 4 times just this weekend. So I filled out one today that's supposedly the latest and greatest. It may be that the application itself doesn't change, but supposedly no bank was even going to be ready to start taking them until this Friday. Again, banks, like my bank, I did it today. Some banks started Monday. Some, like I said, it was kind of a rolling thing, but being first isn't necessarily have to, like, I was also like, oh my God, why can't my bank take it? But she had explained to me, like, look, wait, and then it will be much more streamlined because nobody really knows. So people who applied like Saturday ended up having to go back and forth 7 times. And the people I've talked to who did do that, that actually is what happened to them. They kept saying, oh no, now send me this. Oh no, we didn't need that, but send that. Mine took like 15 minutes. Whereas other people have been spending like 2 days on it. So if you have a banker that you trust, that speaks frankly with you and tells you, look, wait a day, it's worth it, then I would trust that. Like I said, I mean, like Center State Bank, I know they got a TPA and they kind of were, I have people with clients with multiple businesses and they applied for one, but then they wouldn't let them get into the other. So yeah, that's a good point. If you've got multiple businesses and you're applying, apply for the one with the highest payroll first. Don't assume that like the portal won't get shut down or your bank won't get shut down. The stuff I'm putting out is kind of like inside info from banks. They're sending me stuff, I'm sending it out. I'm sanitizing it, but I'm doing it with your bank because then I won't get it anymore if I don't put that disclaimer on. But make sure that you're, like I said, that if they're going to use a third party or whatever, find that kind of information out. Some people have multiple banks and they can't decide. Don't apply with multiple banks for the same stuff because that's not going to be good. But just ask questions. The more informed you are, the better. And like I said, whatever banker you have the closest relationship with, that's where you should apply and keep on top of them and asking them questions. I mean, mine was calling me every night at 6 o'clock telling me what the latest was. I mean, that's above and beyond. But if you've got someone like that, that's the professionals we're looking to work with.
Yeah, and if you don't, reach out to us because we do have contacts of people that are in the industry that are processing this and that can help you. You know, I want to talk about mortgages. Because, you know, people are saying, oh, we're going to be the 2008 all over again, which I don't believe. There's a lot of equity in homes. It's very different than we were back in the day. But there's a lot of people calling for forbearance agreements. And, you know, I tell everybody, have an attorney review those documents because you don't know what you're signing. And those commitments that they're making that might be in fine language that they don't understand. Can you talk a little bit about the distress that people are feeling that don't have income right now? And the first thing they have to do is call their lenders. I mean, they need to have that open communication. But once they come to terms with some sort of agreement, you know, let's talk about the pitfalls of what can happen and why it's important to have somebody review those documents.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that forbearance with mortgages always make me nervous, especially if we're in the home mortgage realm now. People with leases, commercial loans, usually they tend to be a whole lot more on the ball. I have clients with forbearance agreements on commercial loans and they tend to be pretty transparent. None of them have gotten anything in writing yet either, but I feel more confident with that. When your personal home mortgage says that they're going to forbear, I mean, probably in your experience too, I think you talked about it a little bit maybe last week, at least 50% of the time that's going to get messed up. I mean, and that's probably on the low end. They did it, I'm probably some of our listeners, they did it back with Irma, like at Irma's time, because it was a state of emergency, there's a statute that allows that. Most of the people I spoke with who had a forbearance after Irma had a mess. They didn't do it right. They added late fees. It took 100 letters and calls and all this to get it gone. So don't do it unless you have to. That's number one, especially with your home mortgage. There's probably other stuff you can push. On that note, your HOA, because I've already started to get that. Can I not pay my HOA? Always pay your HOA, please. A lot of people do not know. And it kills me that people do not know. HOA can foreclose on you, and guess what? They will. And even if they don't, the fees that come, the late fees and the attorney's fees and all that, and it's my kind. So but I mean, you could owe $100 for an HOA fee that you missed and it turns into $2,000 like in 30 days, which is ridiculous.
We had one that was $300 for the year and it was $3,200 that they had to pay at closing to sell their home.
I know, and it is, and people just don't understand it. Now, we do represent some HOAs. Most of them aren't doing late fees, but I haven't heard any that are, I mean, they're still owed, they're just waiving late fees. In a couple months, things might change up a bit, but either way, eventually they're going to come back around to you. So number one is always pay your HOA. Of all the things you have to pay, I mean, we need food and electricity. I mean, but discretionary income is to pay that HOA. After that, I would pay your mortgage if you can do it. Even a partial payment's better than nothing. But if you cannot do it, then yes, immediately call the mortgage company, document everything, even if it's a pain and you're calling and it's someone named Jim, like write down, I called at this time at this person and I talked to Jim and I said this to Jim and Jim said this to me. And you just have to do that every time. They pretty much will be verbal. They won't be emailing you. If you could get an email address or a fax number to send a follow-up, that's very smart. Again, it's super frustrating for anyone who's ever done that or had to talk to the mortgage company about that kind of stuff. But to the extent that if you can, have a conversation with whoever, you document everything and send whatever follow-up you can as many times as you have to. And even if it's you don't get anything back, because I don't agreements will probably come for 3 months, then you call and say, look, the next month comes, I'm not paying again. I'm in my forbearance. You told me I could. It's because of COVID-19. I lost my job, whatever. And then if you can follow up with a fax or an email or an anything, do that and save it all. Eventually, you may or may not get a forbearance agreement. Hopefully you do. And then yes, it's time to have that reviewed because that's when they're going to sneak in whatever, like your interest rate's going to go up or they forbear it, but there's no payments to the principal. Maybe they didn't pay your escrow for 3 months, which means then your homeowner's insurance. I mean, eventually you'll get caught back up, but then when your escrow goes up the next year, another $200 a month and you didn't budget for that, that's where they're going to get you. They're going to get you somewhere. Most mortgages don't just tack it on at the end and say, oh, okay, there we are. Aren't we nice? I mean, that's where I see it a lot of times with the escrow jumping up the next year and people aren't ready, or things like that. Anything that you've seen, Torey, that you want to alert people to as far as ways that they try to kind of get you in this mortgage forbearance?
Well, I think there's always something that I've seen come in those documents. So I think the most important thing now is exactly what you're talking about. Get a journal, get one booklet that you're keeping all your documentation in. Make sure you get the name of the person that you're talking to. You can probably get an ID number from them if you can't get a phone number, and document the date, the time, the conversation, and keep that rolling, because otherwise what happens is you're 6 months, 8 months, now probably a year down the road. And if you lost that paper, you lose that documentation, there's no way anybody can help you. But don't sign anything without having somebody review it. I don't care what it is. The attorneys, you know, I know Jennifer works with a lot of people and helps them out the best that she can. And there's some law firms out there that are going to charge you an arm and a leg. And that's why we've asked her to come talk with us, because they're guaranteed. But the thing is that you can't afford not to have somebody review those documents. And with the HOA, that is the most dangerous thing not to pay. Document that as well. Find out who you're talking to. They can lien your house, and people, and I don't want to get into a whole bankruptcy thing right now, but I think people need to understand that when you file bankruptcy, it wipes out the debt from the day you file bankruptcy and backwards. Those HOA and condo fees from that day forward are still your responsibility. I mean, we had somebody that owned a condo and they went to sell it a year after they filed bankruptcy. Their bankruptcy was discharged and now they owed $13,000 to the condo. And they're like, whoa, we filed bankruptcy. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. You know, the bankruptcy attorney didn't understand real estate. And it's really important that people understand that you need to be working with people that understand the business. You know, luckily, Jennifer, she understands the business and she understands many fields, not just bankruptcy, but real estate as well. And if you don't understand both of those, then there's no way that you're going to be protected.
And our we're doing a webinar for the firm every Tuesday at 11, and it's going to be about bankruptcy because the way you use your stimulus checks, we haven't talked about that, and I don't know anybody who's gotten it yet, but eventually they'll start coming, like all of that, and especially if you have kids and stuff, those could be $3,000, $3,500 stimulus checks. If you were on the verge of bankruptcy or thinking about it, like that could ruin there's a lot of things, there's a lot of consideration. And we're getting a lot of questions about that. So we'll kind of talk about that. But yeah, if you don't do the HOA fees right and you don't start paying them again, there's a whole lot of pitfalls. So, I mean, to the extent to look at a forbearance agreement, it shouldn't be very much. It's a whole lot more to pay the attorney to dig you out of it if they keep adding late fees and things. But when we go to fight any of that, and HOAs too, the documentation is what wins the day. If you've got it, they usually can't refute it, and then they just move on to the person who doesn't have it, because 85% of the people aren't going to have it. It's easier to take their house or their late fees. Especially with case management companies change, the boards change. So the more documentation you have, the better. That's always that's good everywhere, but especially in the mortgage and HOA stuff.
I want to circle back real quick on the stimulus money and kind of, so people have lost their jobs. A lot of people are seeing no income right now. But as they get this stimulus money, if they have credit card debt and other debt out there that they're going to need to get relief from, I mean, how is that going to affect them? Because it sounded like it could adversely affect them if those funds aren't managed properly.
Right. If you're on the verge, I mean, we have some clients that were thinking about filing or close to filing anyway. That, and if you don't use the stimulus money in the right way, then yes, that could hurt you. If a lot of times, especially with business owners, they end up borrowing money from mom and friends and using mom's credit card and doing all this stuff that I mean, I see it all the time. So it happens. If you use that money to, like, say mom lent you some money, you take that money and pay off mom, and it just, because you know you're filing for bankruptcy and then you file, that's not good. Bankruptcy looks back 6 months. As a rule of thumb, pretty much every time they're going to look back at least 6 months of bank statements. So wherever you take that money for 6 months and however you use it, they're going to look back at that. So if you were close already and on the bubble and you don't use that money right, you can't file, and you got to wait the 6 months, because we got to wait for that to fall off. So, I mean, again, if you're kind of, bankruptcy consults are free everywhere. They're free with our firm, but they're free everywhere. If you don't pay for one, if somebody wants to charge you for it, go to a different attorney. But having the bankruptcy consult and kind of getting an idea, because even if you know, then you know what, you got to wait 4 months because you got a personal loan from your mom for pay your rent, which you're like, that should be fine. But if it ruins your bankruptcy, then, and you, at least then you could know, look, I've got to make this work for 3 more months because I can't file for 3 more months. And maybe you do have to use a credit card and charge it up. There's all sorts of things you can do and not do, and strategies to use. So get a bankruptcy consult sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, we'll probably have a bunch coming soon. So kind of getting in there sooner and kind of figuring out what you want to do and what your strategies are. Maybe you don't need bankruptcy, and maybe if we know stimulus money is coming, we can settle your debts. But I talked about it in my other, ostrich syndrome is when you just stick your head in the sand and you say, nah, I'll just worry about this much later. Don't.
I did it. I was there. 2007 and 2008, I needed to short sell 2 houses, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to ignore all this and it's going to go away. So I didn't want to open my mail. I didn't want to answer my phone, and it never went away. I mean, at the end of the day, it all worked out. But when you feel overwhelmed like that, I think that's important that you talked about, that you guys do get free consultations on the whole bankruptcy. And if they call now, you can help them prepare and guide them on how to do things properly to protect them and put them in their best interest. Because, you know, I had an attorney finally guide me through what to do, and it was so simple. So I had 4 months of stress that I never really needed to have because I was afraid. And I think fear paralyzes people. So, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing this, because I think it's extremely important. You can go on the internet, you can watch social media, and you can get a lot of misinformation. And that misinformation can really harm you if you don't know the right steps to take. So it's extremely important that you get with somebody like the Orlando Law Group or whoever you trust, but make sure it's somebody that really knows what they're doing. Because I'm not kidding, my clients that had to pay $13,000 and they were going to be able to get personally sued over those condo dues because it was bankruptcy, they were freaking out and they had no clue that was coming.
Yeah, no, I mean, I see that issue a lot because after the discharge, things pick back up, and a lot of, and I don't know if, I think that sometimes the people are just so freaked out that they don't hear some of the things that are said. And I think a lot of times attorneys don't explain it. They just are like, let's do this. And I'm not worried about what happens to you after. But, and most people do kind of try to avoid the uncomfortable, scary situation. almost 100 times out of 100, after, no matter what the conversation is, after people learn, they're like, I feel so much better because I asked you and now I know.
Right.
You can solve
And
any problem.
it's a panicking time right now, right? For a lot of people, it's, you know, I watched something else on social media the other day. It's like, get over, you know, being negative about this. Well, people are afraid. And how do you overcome fear, in my mind, is empowering with knowledge. And with knowledge from the right people that are going to give you good information. And that, not that the fear is going to completely go away, but at least you're not going to have that anxiety if you're getting guided, and you can actually take steps, because I think we get higher anxiety when we can't respond and react and perform, because as humans, we like to get things done. And when you feel paralyzed, then it's very concerning. So, you know, just giving that little bit of information is going to help people understand that there is a roadmap with the right questions. And they may not even know the right questions, right? They don't need to know the questions. They just need to know that they're in a situation that they need help. And you guys have several attorneys that can help guide them through that.
Right. Yeah, we do have multiple specialties, but one of the reasons why we're all together in one firm is because we can help each other, because most legal problems just aren't, it's okay, you might have a bankruptcy, but then what about the HOA? Let's get the HOA / the closing specialist that can help you. I mean, most problems are just multifaceted. Try to work together and give you a plan. We could, like I said, we could solve any problem, but a lot of times we could solve it a lot quicker and cheaper if we get it at the beginning and not like halfway through. So,
well, you can guide people. You know, I think it's important to have that roadmap. That, you know, I liken it to debt, right? When you're going to get a mortgage, people are like, oh, I'm just going to go pay off this debt. Well, if that debt was more than 7 years old, you're actually making your credit worse than if you would have let a lender guide you through that process and what to do. There are people, now there's good and bad out there and everything. So I wouldn't say just go Google search and grab the first guy that's, you know, on Google. Maybe, maybe not, but find somebody that's worked with somebody, or find somebody that's credible, that's going to be honest with you. I think Jennifer will tell you, she may not always tell you what you want to hear, but she's going to tell you the way it is to help guide you and protect you the best possible under the law.
Yep, that's true.
I know. I had a customer tell me yesterday, you told them, you might not want to hear what I say, but this is how you're
Exactly. Because eventually you're going to find out. You know, one of the other things that I say a lot of times that people don't listen to, but now they all want to listen to, is the estate. So I did want to give a little bit on that, because we're getting a lot of calls about that. The medical surrogate is really important right now, because I think everybody now realizes that if you have to go to the hospital, your family members, if you actually get this virus and you're hospitalized, or really if you're in the hospital period now, because we just had this on Friday, your family members cannot go with you pretty much for anything now because of all the lockdown. So if you don't have a healthcare surrogate of some kind and your wish is made and your family members can't get in there, from what I'm hearing, it's not really easy for anybody to call and find out from your family members who can't be there what you need. So now is the time to have a healthcare surrogate. Powers of attorney are really important too, especially if you run a business, if you're a solo practitioner and things still need to get paid, or you still need to pay taxes, pay payroll taxes, do any of the stuff you need to do. If you don't have a power of attorney, then there's nobody who could do it but you. There are some wills too. If you don't have a will, there's a way to take care of that. Obviously, there'll be a probate in the event that you pass, but there's a whole lot of things that can be done. Some people we are still open to be able to do people's wills. We are still doing closings. Closings are essential. Our underwriter said we have to do closings. We're doing them as safely as possible. There is remote notary now, which is new in the state of Florida. A couple months ago, we were all excited that it was here, and now it's really it's here. It doesn't work for wills yet. It's the only thing it doesn't work for, but there's a couple strategies on how we could get wills signed. Not everything needs a witness, not everything needs a notary. So we have strategies for doing all that kind of stuff too. Again, people don't do any of that stuff because they don't want to think about dying. It's something you need to do. We say it a lot, but now it's really something you need to do, and a lot of people are freaking out trying to do it now. We can get it done. It's not the easiest time to get it done, but it's kind of thinking about if you haven't been thinking about that, and especially now.
Well, I want to talk briefly about, you talked about power of attorneys, and I had a friend that had a tragedy several years ago, and I don't think a lot of people think about this, but if you have adult children over the age of 18 and they're not married and something happens to them, you are entitled to zero information if you don't have a power.
Yep. Yeah, I mean,
So,
that's a really good point. I mean, like you said, the minute they're 18, so even in college, if they haven't set that up, and that happens, I mean, especially when younger kids pass, and it's very, like, you might not know anything about where any of their stuff is or anything. Even if they have a case, like a personal injury case or whatever, it's very difficult to wade your way through that when you're already grieving it, and it's so difficult. Yeah, so it's a smart parent does that for their kids before they go off to college, at least the powers of attorney part, even the medical, because you won't get any information and you won't be able to help them. And if you don't have it, probably nobody else does either. And that's a horrible spot for them to be in, to not have anyone to kind of look after their medical interests.
well, I don't think you think about it, right? Your kids are young,
Yeah.
you think everything's going to be fine, but my friend's son got in a motorcycle accident. She couldn't get his cell phone, she couldn't get his phone records, she couldn't get into his bank account, she could get nothing until they went through the court system. So, and even with this situation now, with this COVID, it is hitting children. So if you have a college stage child and something happens, you're not going to get any medical records, right? I mean, is it going to be a lot more challenging if you don't have that power of attorney?
Yeah, no, you'll just have to prove that you're the one. I mean, anyone in their young 20s or whatever, like you said, that isn't married, usually the spouse, they assume, or I mean, if they're separated from their spouse. So I mean, yeah, that whole, we can have a whole thing about all those situations, but say they have a spouse and they're separated from that spouse, and that's the last person you want to make medical decisions, or you're separate. I guess that's the person the hospital's going to go to. So, I mean, then you have to prove, no, they didn't really want that. Or if it's divorced parents and the dad and the mom both say, no, I know, and the mom says, no, I know, and they disagree. I mean, all of that, a couple adult children with older parents, because yeah, it's the same thing. The flip side is if your parents are elderly and it's a brother and sister and they don't agree, or they don't, I mean, if everybody had a power of attorney, we would have like probably at least 50% less of probates and all that kind of work, because a lot of it's just people fighting. That's so avoidable.
Well, I was just on the phone with a customer of mine that lives in a 55 plus community, and she told me she doesn't have a will. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have a will? She's like, no, I never did my will. I'm like, you need to get a will. Like,
like, I don't have anything. Yeah, everybody has something. Even that, everybody has something pretty much.
Can you talk just a little bit about that? So let's say you have a bank account with $30,000, or you have a 401k, you own a home that has some equity, you didn't do a will, what happens?
Well, I mean, if you have a spouse, I mean, there's general rules with where everything goes. If you've got a spouse or children, it's usually pretty easy. People who don't have that and just have like brothers and sisters, but then the one sister died and that didn't have a probate either. I mean, you could go pretty far down the rabbit hole. Again, so unavoidable. Generally, if you see us and there's stuff we could do without a will, we let you know. There's stuff you could do with bank accounts, transfer on death, and then you're outside of probate. There's stuff you could do with deeds, life estate deeds, and all that kind of stuff, transfers outside probate. But even a homestead, like your homestead house does not get probated. If you don't have the deed, like a life estate deed, then you still have to do a proceeding in probate court to prove who your heirs are and who gets them. It's not super expensive, but it's a few $1,000s that you didn't have to spend. Plus, then you've got to wait. If you got a life estate deed, it could transfer immediately and you could go put it on the market if it's ready for that. Otherwise, you're waiting. Usually what happens is you get to the closing table and someone figures out, oh no, we don't have the authority to sell this. And then you've got to wait another 60 days to get all that done while your seller falls through.
Yeah, and blended families. I mean, blended families, it becomes even more challenging.
Oh, so. Yeah. That is like I said, I mean, we could just, half of the stuff we do related to like probate is all that stuff that like, look, if you spent 5 minutes writing this estate plan, man, it would be so much better for everybody. Less aggravation, less money to lawyers, quicker. I mean, it's the number one thing that everybody should do that they don't. But
so first off, give your phone number for anybody that wants to reach out to you, to your law firm.
Okay, so yeah, it's 407-512-4394. We have the Orlando Law Group Facebook page. Pretty much all of our contact information is on there and it's monitored. You can leave messages. You can call us. You can, we have a website too, theorlandolawgroup.com. I'm sure there's plenty of ways to find out. We'll share this on our Facebook. Like I said, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. Hopefully you'll put the recording out, but we're here to help. We much rather get on the front end than the back end of all this stuff.
Yeah, and I would suggest if anybody has any questions, you can private message us, and next week Jennifer can answer those questions, because some of these issues are sensitive and people might not want to share their situation. But if you have a situation and you have a question, like I had somebody I talked to today that they were in an apartment rental, they purchased a home, they signed the agreement not to pay 2 months of the lease amount, but they actually were going to pay until the apartment got re-rented. They were paying $1,400 a month. Now the rental property's asking $1,550. You know, for how long are they going to be required to pay this now that they're asking a lot more money for that apartment? You know,
a lot of people are messing around with that, kicking people out, trying to kick people out, raising rent, taking away internet. People who live together who are kicking one of the people out and thinking that there won't be a whole lot of recourse because the courts are closed. So I mean, yeah, it's people, bad people are doing extra bad things now. I just like horrible that that's the truth, but it is. So, I mean, all that stuff that's a little bit, no, if you don't have a written lease or you said it and you don't have it in writing, I mean, man, at least send an email that says, look, based upon our conversation, XYZ. That can be a contract for us lawyer types. At least it's better than zero. The phone conversation you had, that's really not going to be super helpful. So, I mean, you got to protect yourself even now.
Well, I appreciate you taking your time. We're going to come back next week. So again, if anybody has any questions, you can message us and Jennifer can answer those questions, and whatever's happening at the time, she'll talk about legally what you can do to help protect yourself, or reach out to them, especially if you're seeing a lot of debt. Free consultations for bankruptcy, that's huge. I think that right now it's extremely important to communicate and get guided to make the right decisions rather than just flying by the seat of your pants and Lord knows what it's going to happen down the road. And it'll save a lot of money if you get guided, as opposed to going and saying, please fix this, because I've done it. Jennifer, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks for the opportunity, Tori. Good to see you.
Likewise.